Welcome, everybody. I think we're quite set. So today we're going to talk about enterprise-grade authentication and with Sitefinity, how you can improve that. Journey, I will say why this is a journey in a bit. I'm Jordan Ivchev. I'm a manager with one of the Sitefinity development team in Bulgaria. So bear with my Eastern European accent, a bit hard for some. What is authentication and authorization? Nowadays, it can be like a roller coaster. It can be scary at first. It can have a steep slopes at some points. And with older system, you may be afraid to even start with that. But with decent software like Sitefinity, it can, and some other software I will mention, it can be quite a smooth experience, and you will enjoy the ride in the end. So first, we're going to see what are the main challenges with authentication and authorization, and we will see how Sitefinity advantages, what advantages Sitefinity gives you, and how we can make it very smooth ride. So most of the problems with enterprise-grade authentication is first single sign-on. Nobody wants their users or even don't speak about employees to remember hundreds of passwords, or IT person to remove single user from that system or another system. Then it's complex identity management. It's simple when you manage only the users in your organization, but when your business, your vendors or your subcontractors come to the system, or then all the social accounts for your customers come in, the picture can become quite scary. And this obviously drives the integration cost. I will mention why. And there is a very important challenge because authentication authorization is part of security. And security is something that you cannot plan. Security is reactive. You have to take a reactive approach. You may have, in a month, you have several vulnerabilities found in your particular system or particular software you use, and you have to patch them every time they are found as soon as you can. It's not something you can prepare for. You can prepare for, but it's definitely something not plannable. So, single sign-on. Historically, the businesses used to have a single main system or single application they use. Usually it was a desktop app, and then this was moved to the web. But with nowadays, the things change. There is a SPA application now, there is a mobile as well, and then it's come a microservices. This is the hottest thing right now. And you want to, once the user identify, you want to identify at once, and their identity to travel, so to say, across all their microservices through the website or mobile app, through all their services, so they can proper authorization for the proper resources in those microservices as well. So the pictures change now to a single login. This is pretty much standard nowadays. Some companies base that on Windows authentication and their Active Directory. So some companies do it with social logins when their users come in, because they want their users to submit tickets, to track their behavior on the sites, get some additional information about characteristic of those users, their gender, and etc., via the digital experience platforms and so on. And this is for premise, but when you go to the cloud, you obviously need cloud authentication. Azure AD is one of the examples, but you can use ZeroAuth, Salesforce Identity, Google Identity, AWS Identity. Pretty much every cloud provider has that centralized solution for identity management. And when you speak for authentication, especially if you're new to the field, there is a lot of protocols and standards about that. It's well defined, very secure, made by professionals in the fields. And here are the few glossaries I will briefly mention to you. Pretty much every site out there using OAuth in some form. It's a standardized protocol and endpoints for authorization. And then it's come OpenID that allows this decentralized authentication across different providers. So you can delegate to the trusted party the authentication of the user, and then you do authorization, or you can delegate that as well. And that it's come OpenID Connect. This is the protocol that is pretty much standard now across all the major business providers in the cloud or on-premise, and it's kind of merged those two. It's built on the top of OAuth, but it's add additional endpoints for our authentication, and also add like a icing on a cake, some nice properties for user. For example, you get their first name, last name, and email for free. So that's a simple profile managing via the claims. And identity provider, when I say identity provider, in the past it used to be secure token services, or sometimes they use it interchangeably. But basically this is a service that creates, manages, and authenticates those users. And you can trust those services and identities they send you via the claims. I said several times claim. The claim is simply the statement that comes from these trusted parties about the users that log it in. And it's maybe email, their first name, their last name, or it may be the group or department in the organization they belong. So they're very useful, and we will talk a lot about them in my talk today. Relying parties are simply application or services that can understand those claims. Because with claims, it's very important to verify their authenticity. You don't want anyone to tamper with your ID card or driving license. So basically, identity is that equivalent in the digital world. So JSON Web Tokens and Secure Assertion Markup Language are two such protocols for exchanging those identities, and they allow relying parties to verify the identity via the cryptography and decrypt and see that it's come for trusted authority and decrypt the claims encrypted in that. With that, the picture becomes quite interesting. This is for identity server website documentation, and pretty much there is a lot of protocols involved here. I will not explain them all, but if you're going to implement that as a custom solution, the protocols already defined it by Oasis or another organizations out there, you can implement it. It's not that how to say, not impossible, yeah, but it's hard, and your cost will drive extremely high when you come to upgrade those when the securities arise, because it's very hard to find good security professionals that understand those protocols and may implement them in a reliable manner and act upon these vulnerabilities when they are discovered. So pretty much those are the challenges. So let's see how Sitefinity can help you solve those challenges. First, we'll go to see what we have out of the box as external identity providers, and we will see how you can map those claims that come from these identity providers about those users to roles in Sitefinity, so you can manage what these users can access. So basically, authorize them based on the claims, and then you'll see how you can map those fields that come for free via the OpenID or another provider like Facebook, like first name, last name, and we can address and personalize our engagement with the user further. Mapping those two fields in Sitefinity, and I will spend a bit time about Azure AD. As we see, this is the most used provider by us and our partners for doing the authentication and authorization in the cloud, because it's have some benefits. I will get to that in a bit. Out-of-the-box providers, first the business. Sitefinity is primarily used by the business, and out of the box we provide Windows authentication via LDAP, and we provide ADFS as well for bridging to that. But our jewel is the OpenID connector because it allows to connect to pretty much anything outside, being that Salesforce, Azure, Yahoo, Amazon, Google, you name it. And then when you want to recognize your user or know your users, you can leverage pretty much all the social media and developer identity providers there. So pretty solid picture. I will, if something is missing here, I will tell you how to add it to the picture yourself with a very little code. So first good feature is claims to role mapping. Basically, what's this mean? I will just explain it on a higher level, and we'll demonstrate that in a bit in the Sitefinity with my demo. It means the users come to our single site login. It may be Sitefinity internal users. He or she choose to authenticate, or he or she can choose to go to Azure or Facebook for authentication. And then from us or from provider, there is claim that comes to the system, and based to that claim, we decide what kind of user we have. We can have several, I use the colors, but it's actually roles. It's maybe admin, backend users, editor, marketeers, page editors, whatever you define in the system. And with that, we map the claim to that specific role in the system. And for now, we store that in a cookie or return back to the mobile application or the Sitefinity admin backend that also use Sitefinity as internally as provider, as a secure access token. And with that token, we now know who the user is and what resources they have access to. As I say, the OpenID Connect is our jewel in the crow about authentication. And pretty much every business provider, as you can see, supports that. And pretty much everybody except Amazon support that additional layer on top of OpenID Connect core protocols that is called OpenID Connect Discovery. This means it's a well-known endpoint. You can see it on the screen actually. Usually it's on that location. That's why the OpenID Connect is great. I love that. They predefine where the endpoint and what this endpoint has to return. And it's you can basically guess for any provider that supports OpenID Connect what is the URL for your endpoints you need. So with that URL, you just paste it in Sitefinity, and Sitefinity will auto-configure that provider. She will go or the product will go to the provider, get the proper security key, so we can authorize public key, and we can validate that claims and identities coming from that provider are trusted and not tampered with. So this is a great feature. I will demo that in a bit. Not exactly that, but taking the claims for that. And the another great feature is claim to fields mapping. It's again for OpenID Connect provider, because the other provider we kind of did it with custom code. For this generic provider, we allow, if the claims come with different name, you can map that to a specific internal Sitefinity user profile field. We witnessed a given name or name coming from different provider for first name, so you can easily map that. Or email coming from with a different claim name. The value is still the email, but the claim name is different, and I will demo that in a bit. So, speaking of Azure AD, it's not only the identity provider, it's give you much greater capabilities. One of capabilities we get a lot of requests to support is B2B. It's basically allows your subcontractors or other big organizations that have their own single sign-on to use that sign-on for their users to authenticate in your system via Azure AD. It creates so-called guest account and proxies all this to the Sitefinity via the Azure AD. Another great feature is Azure B2C or business to consumer. And this creates this sandboxed tenant for all your external users. You can then manage it manually or programmatically, or even allow them to self-sign in to your product or to your website or mobile application. It's a great feature. And for that, we made an extra effort to support sign-in policy, exactly that feature, because it's another layer, another functionality on top of identity management. So we have fully support for all of this, plus we added extra sign-in policy for B2C. So how this is possible in Sitefinity and why we're confident that it's robust and secure? That's because we use internally Identity Server 3 for .NET. This is the most robust and the only OpenID certified .NET solution in the market. Even Microsoft recommends that and embraces that. And it's governed by the biggest open source foundation for .NET. It's called .NET Foundation, obviously. It's governed by that, and it's built by the most trusted expert in the industry. And it's so solid that with recent months, we only see security updates. It's fully featured, and we see only security updates. There is a new version, some of you may know, it's version 4, but it's target .NET Standard, and the intention is to work on .NET Core. Some point when Sitefinity goes to .NET Core, we will move to that version as well. But for .NET, this is the most robust and stable solution right now. This is why I give you this information, because we keep on we constantly monitor them and upgrade Sitefinity as they change it. And also, it gives you very low cost ability. If you have some custom identity system, pretty much you can easily create your own middleware with OIN middleware for .NET and plug it in an identity server, and you get a ton of nice claims functions that help you do this very efficiently with very little code. And also, if you use some third-party system that do authentication authorization, I'm pretty sure that there is already well-written OIN provider for that. So even you don't need to write it in most cases. There is many dozens of such providers already written, and they're validated by community and very reliable. If you're interested or you didn't see any of the providers as I mentioned before, you don't see your provider, talk with me. I will direct you where this repository for OIN providers you can easily plug in with one drop the DLL and a small configuration change in Sitefinity. So without further ado, we're going to bread and butter, our demo. I will show you how you can easily configure Facebook as a provider and automatically assign roles by provider. It's not a good example for Facebook, but for the demo, I will do that. I will mention it again during the demo. And then I will show you the Azure AD, both as a claim and a field provider, how you can leverage those capabilities to make a smooth integration with Azure AD. So here is, I pre-recorded the demo so I can condense it in the time of the talk. So I will start it. So first, as I say, we'll start with Facebook. It's advanced setting. You usually do it once and it works. You go to securities tokens, authentication provider, and then you go to Facebook. And there you just have to fill a couple of fields. There are usually 2 fields for most of the providers. One is for application ID and another one is for security. I created a Facebook app and allow it and added the product called identification to it. And I copied the ID and then I copied the secret. I put it in the corresponding fields in Sitefinity. and what I need to enable the provider, and I will show you if you change the auto-assigned roles. By default, it's only users, that means front-end users, and they're limited, they cannot go to the backend, but I need to show you how the users will show in the backend, so I make it a bit elevated permission. Don't do this with Facebook. You don't want Facebook to become your backend users. So beware, just for demo. And when I configure that, I need one more change to make in Facebook. You have to go to Facebook login. This is the product you have to add to your Facebook application, and go to settings, and you have to set up return URL. If you go to our documentation, it's well documented where this return URL should be, but basically for all providers, it is the domain name, some predefined, you cannot read it, and again, the provider name. And when the users go to what is the experience, when they go to the login, they click the Facebook link, they go to the Facebook. Facebook asks them if you trust this product to receive your identity, and they say, okay, I trust Sitefinity, or trust actually your site, not Sitefinity itself. And when you go to the backend, you have my backend user with my Cyrillic name. So this is my name in Cyrillic, and my personal email. So that's how it's look. And when you go to the user profile, these properties are intentionally made read-only, because when you change, I decide to change it in the Facebook, they will change it here. And as a bonus, I get my nice avatar there. It used to be a dragon. It's not look on the projector like a dragon. So that's how fast you can integrate with Facebook. You see, few clicks, and you're done. And you have all your users. You probably use for the front end. Let's go to Azure. This is the interesting stuff. So again, as I say, we didn't have the dedicated provider because we're going to use OpenConnect. And I strongly encourage to use OpenConnect for any business providers, because this gives you most flexibility. Again, simple app, create it on Azure. You copy the application ID or client ID, whatever it's called. It depends on the provider. And you put it in the OpenID client ID property. And then you have to find in Azure the authority name. It's there in their documentation, but pay attention to the last part. The suffix there, you have a hard time to find it. It's under the user profile. And I will have to authenticate Azure Active Directories, and I copy it. It's just under the name of Progress Software Corporation. There was the Progress Software Azure AD name, authority, sorry. And with that, we are done. We need to set up the redirect URL as we did for Facebook, but now you can copy it from the hint, put it there, and you may not this to end with custom. You put the domain of the site. You see the site is nextSitefinity.site. And you can put something meaningful for you. I put Azure AD. And you copy that, and you go to application like we did. Very similar to Facebook. You go to Azure. It's a bit hard to find because most of users expect to find it on the left. It actually, right there, small link on the right, it's called redirect URLs. You can see that. And you click on that, and you just paste it. With Azure, you can actually use a single application for multiple websites. So you have ability to add more web or mobile apps there. So you can use as you please, different scenarios, more than one scenario, but for simplicity, we have one app and one Sitefinity. And then we need to change the name because the default name is OpenID, and we now use Progress. I use my credential for Progress to log to Sitefinity backend. And I put something meaningful like Progress ID here. Then something important, because Azure by default do not return the claim called email, you have to remove that property for OpenID. This is only for Azure. Most of other providers return the email as an email claim, but Azure is different. And as I mentioned, we will leave this for front end users by default. because we want the general progress users to be just front-end users. But for specific users, for Sitefinity engineering, I will show you how, we want them to be a backend users. First, you need to define the scope of claims. This will be one claim we will request for Azure. It's called groups, but you can define as many claims in that scope you want. And then we have to say to Sitefinity, allow this scope to be passed to the application, like our mobile backend, when they get it. And then we go to relying parties and define that we allow this scope. Just a minute. We add this scope of claims to be requested from external identity like Azure. So each time we contact a relying party, we will request this scope we defined for our application. Then we put some meaningful name. As I say, we want everybody for Sitefinity engineering to be a backend user in the system. And I put that as a name here. And then I define which claim I'm interested in. This is a group claim. And I have to find the value for the group. And how you find the value for the group in Azure? You go to the user, you go to the user groups, and you choose the group name. And for Sitefinity engineering, this is the GUID. If you want to authorize us to some of your site, feel welcome. We'll help with that. And you put it as a claim value. And then you specify users with this claim. I want to make this kind of, to assign this kind of roles. You can define as many claim mapping as you want. And for as many providers, actually you can limit by provider a particular role mapping. And one more thing we have to have in mind for Azure. Again, like in Facebook, there is a quirks. They're very fine to find. You go to the manifest of the application and you specify group membership claim, return all. It's very important because by default, Azure do not return it. And you see, I mentioned the email doesn't claim. You see, my email is blank now when I log it with Azure. How to fix that? Go again to advanced settings. And for OpenID connector, the provider, sorry. And now we have this nice feature for OpenID Connect to map the roles. By default, we created email for you, but as Azure uses something different, you go and edit the email claim to be mapped to UPN. This is the name the claim is called in Azure. So it's actually returned, but it's a different name. And when I save it and I log it via the Azure AD, you see, you barely notice that this goes to Progress or Azure. You pretty much instantly log it if you're on your corporate computer. And when I go to the backend, you see my user is now with Progress email. That's fast and that's easy to integrate with Azure. And how I made these buttons to appear on the login screen, this is my last part of the demo. You go to the login page, click Edit on the login widget, and all providers you just define it will show up as a checkboxes. You click 2 checkboxes, you click Save, you publish, and you voila. That's how fast you can do this with Sitefinity. So, anybody saw me coding today? Okay, let's get back to my presentation. So, what are takeaways from today? I'm still on the demo. Where is the button? Okay. So, takeaways from today. No code or very low code approach for pretty much every provider out there with Sitefinity. Business providers, all major providers, thanks to OpenID and Identity Server, you have it out of the box. Social provider as well. And you can add more social provider for some markets. I know Russia comes to mind. There is a different provider popular there. And everything is very customizable thanks to OWIN middlewares, and everything is out there, open source, governed by experts in the field, and patch it very frequently. So you can rely on Sitefinity because we rely on very robust solution under the hood, embraced by the whole .NET community. And when speaking of security, I take a moment of your time. go check our built-in security model. Because authentication and authorization is very important, but it's more important to be vigilant against unauthorized access. Those hackers that probe your sites. And with this security model, we implemented the recent advancement in browser technology about security, leveraging the security headers and other very recently introduced in the industry countermeasures for those vulnerabilities. And you get this just by enabling the security model. Check it out. It's out there. It's very easy, similar to that, to configure in advanced settings, of course, because it's for admins, and we don't want you to mess it once it's set up. And what I wanted to say, with that, I want to thank you. If you have questions about security model, come and ask me. The booth is closed, but you can ask me after the talk. With that, thank you. We're right on time. If you have questions, because we're running out of time, you can ping me now. Yeah? Yeah.
So this was a great talk about how to refer authentication to another provider.
Yep.
Is there a good way to set up Sitefinity as your security service for?
We can do that, but we are not in the business of providing authentication authorization and managing that. We encourage our users to do it, for example, if they have a content app, like companion app with native script for their editors to approve content or something like that. This is the use case we have, and it's well documented when we have that. So Sitefinity basically can be used by identity provider for a mobile app, and we have it in our documentation, in our blog post. And yeah, it is possible, but Sitefinity is not that rich. You cannot have B2B with Sitefinity right off the box. You can do it with code, of course, but it's not our purpose to provide that. Azure doing a much better job. You don't have claims proxying that think of with the scopes I did. So this is the functionality we didn't see a request coming for to enable it at all. Nobody asked it about. But to authenticate your backend user, Sitefinity is pretty decent identity provider thanks to the identity server and OpenID Connect. We are fully we are supporting OpenID Connect fully for us as Sitefinity as an identity provider. That answers the question?
So when are you writing your tutorial to do this with SAML? You mentioned it will work with SAML.
Yeah. It's under the hood. Some of our providers use SAML. So some of I'm not sure the Google or Facebook. No, the Google or Facebook use OpenID. I'm not sure, but some of the identity provider I show it out of the box under the hood use SAML, and identity server has support for SAML built in. So we internally support SAML using OpenID, but it's not. Yeah, you're probably going to OWIN route. There is a samples out there to make it. It's very easy because identity server provide the core functionality. You just need to wire it in the provider. It's very little code. Any other question? Okay, with that, thank you for your attention.